All right, let's dive in. We're constantly hearing about the future of digital security, this idea of creating encryption that's so tough, not even a quantum computer could crack it. But what happens if the blueprint for that future, our quantum-proof shield, has a tiny, almost invisible flaw? A flaw that could bring the whole thing crashing down.
I mean, really think about that. What if the very thing designed to protect us tomorrow is already vulnerable today? And we're not talking about some wildly complex new attack. We're talking about a simple coding mistake, a mistake that could completely undermine our digital lives in a post quantum world.
So, our story really starts with a mystery. There's this brand new cryptographic standard, and it's acting weird. It was failing in ways that just didn't make any sense. It was almost like there was a ghost in the machine.
And at the heart of all this is something called ML-KEM. Now, you can think of ML-KEM as the next generation shield for, well, everything. We're talking online banking, government secrets, national security, the whole shebang. It's built on some seriously complex math, and it's supposed to be our number one defense against the quantum threat. But when they started testing it, something was really, really wrong. The system was failing every single one of its initial tests. And here's the crazy part. It only failed when it was fed completely random data. If you gave it predictable test numbers, it worked perfectly fine. This made the bug feel like a phantom. You knew it was there, but it was almost impossible to catch. So, how in the world do you catch a ghost? Well, you have to get clever. You have to set a trap. And that's exactly what the cryptographers did. They basically had to become digital detectives to hunt down this incredibly elusive error. And the method they came up with was just brilliant. It's a technique called differential testing. Here's the idea. They built a perfect version of the code in Python, which is a language that can handle numbers of literally any size without ever breaking a sweat. Then they ran the exact same random data through both this flawless Python model and the real C code, and they just compared the results. Wherever the C version spit out a different answer, bam, they knew exactly where the ghost was hiding. And that clever comparison led them right to the culprit. And you know what? It wasn't some ridiculously complicated flaw in the logic. It was something way more basic, an issue that's now been nicknamed the billion number bug. So, what is an integer overflow? Honestly, this analogy just nails it. In programming, you can think of a variable as a container. It's got a fixed size. An overflow is what happens when you try to cram a gallon of data into a little pint-sized glass. It just doesn't fit. Now, in this C code, that pint glass was something called a signed 32-bit integer. And that type of container can hold a maximum number of just over 2.1 billion. Now, that sounds like a massive number, right? But in the world of heavy-duty cryptography, it turns out it's not always enough. Because this is the gallon of water. One of the core calculations inside ML-KEM could, for a split second, create a number that's almost 37 billion. So you can probably see where this is going. How does that fit into our 2.1 billion pint glass? And this chart just shows you how huge the problem is. The number the program needed to handle was over 17 times bigger than the space it had to store it. And the extra data doesn't just vanish. It actually wraps around and flips the number into something completely wrong, corrupting the entire calculation. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, can't you just fix the number after the fact? Can't you correct it? And the answer, unfortunately, is a hard no. Once that data is lost, it is gone for good. See, the issue is all about the order of things. The big overflow where the data spills everywhere happens before a corrective step called modular reduction can even kick in. That step is supposed to keep the numbers in the right range, but it's too late. It's like spilling the water all over the floor before you get a chance to measure it. The crucial information is already gone, and the final result is just permanently broken.
And let me be clear, this isn't a sometimes problem. The math is absolute. The research paper on this proves that for the specific numbers being used in ML-KEM, anytime this overflow happens, the final answer is guaranteed to be wrong, every single time.
And this is the moment where a simple programming bug turns into something much, much scarier, a critical security vulnerability. An error this predictable isn't just a flaw, it's a tool. It's a potential weapon for an attacker. So why is this so incredibly dangerous? Well, because an attacker can now intentionally trigger this overflow. And when the system fails in that specific, predictable way, it acts like an oracle. It accidentally leaks tiny little breadcrumbs of information about the secret key. If a hacker can do this over and over, they can piece those clues together and eventually steal the entire key, breaking the encryption.
It's a silent, devastating backdoor that bypasses the system's core defenses. And we're not just talking about big supercomputers here. This vulnerability is actually most dangerous on the billions of little 32-bit devices that are literally all around us. They're in our cars, our smart thermostats, our credit cards, the very systems that this post-quantum cryptography was supposed to be protecting.
But hey, this story doesn't end on a downer. It doesn't end with a vulnerability. It ends with a fix, and with some really crucial lessons learned for how we build a safer digital future.
And we have to give credit where credit is due. All of this amazing detective work, uncovering this incredibly subtle but critical flaw, was done by researcher Mohammed Ben Ammar Sharidi. This is exactly the kind of deep analysis that keeps our digital world from falling apart. So what was the fix? Get this. It was shockingly simple. All it took was changing one little variable type from a 32-bit integer to a 64-bit one. They literally just swapped that pint glass for a giant barrel. This one line of code is just a huge reminder of how the tiniest details in cryptography can have massive consequences.
So the takeaways for any developers out there are crystal clear. First, always make sure your containers are big enough for your data. In this case, use 64-bit integers. Second, do your corrections like modular reduction as early and as often as possible. And finally, use modern tools that can actually prove, mathematically, that this kind of error can never happen in your code in the first place.
This whole story is just a powerful lesson. As we race to build this quantum-proof future, maybe the greatest threats aren't going to be some crazy futuristic attacks. Maybe they're the tiny, overlooked bugs hidden deep in our own code. It really makes you wonder, what else is lurking out there, just waiting to be found?